Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Vegas Squares podcast. We are sitting here in the home studio, myself and Spike on the Lazy Boys, which is kind of fitting because that's kind of what we are during this time, except for I know you're still working, but I'm sure you're still probably taking full advantage of being at home most of, if not all of the day.
It's not bad, I'm not going to lie. There is still a lot of work being done. We have an event that we had to move from an in-person event to online, so there's a lot of work going into that. But the problem is half the contacts that we need on outside agencies and all that, a lot of them have been laid off due to this.
Yikes,
so
yeah.
Getting somebody that we can talk to is a little strange. But yeah, no, it's been a lot of work. And actually the team that I just joined, we've been laughing our balls off during the group chat. We get a group Google Hangout that we all use to like kind of talk and laugh during the day. It's been pretty funny.
Speaking of, I don't know if you've seen this. It was trending on Twitter 1 or 2 days ago. It was a collection or a compilation of celebrities singing "Imagine" by John Lennon, one line at a time, and they were very let's call it tone deaf in more ways than one. It did not go over well on Twitter.
I can imagine. Yeah.
There was a lot of people making comments like, imagine a world where celebrities don't sit in their $1 million mansions and tell us it's going to be okay.
No, I didn't see that, but that...
It did not go well. I get their thought or what they thought behind it, but it's really hard for a celebrity of any stature, of any, net worth, to sit here and try to make stories or try to make, videos telling the common man, oh, it's going to be okay. Because we're all sitting here with no jobs. So
yeah.
It didn't go over very well. I did like the one where some guy recorded a response to it. And I don't know if you're familiar with the song Imagine by John Lennon. I'm sure you are.
Yes.
But he said, imagine all the people lining up for food. That was the best comment I saw, the response. So, anyways, we're not here to talk about social issues. We're here to talk about sports, which, again, currently aren't running on the fields or ices or pitches or whatever you want to say. But the NFL has obviously taken the lead because they have started their league year. We talked last podcast about free agency and some of the early moves. We talked about Brady and, what his move is going to mean for both Tampa Bay and New England. I will say this, though. Speaking of social media, Dave Portnoy, the Barstool Sports guy,
yes,
he is very, very salty about Tom leaving.
Is he?
Oh, very much so.
I haven't really been paying attention. I actually follow him on Twitter, and I do like Barstool Sports. I just haven't really been looking at him for the past few days.
So he's been very, trying to take everyone's mind off of everything, with, just the various different things that Barstool Sports can do to kind of take your mind off the pandemic. And then when a Tampa Bay media outlet reported that Tom Brady was going to sign with the Buccaneers, he quote tweeted the tweet by the news outlet and said, Jesus Christ, there's a pandemic going on. Can you guys focus on what's important? So I know he's a little butthurt, and I don't blame him. But anyways, before we jump into this free agency, let's thank the sponsors. First and foremost, 12 Ounce Sports Radio and Seat Giant, promo code 12 Ounce Sports, where you can get discounted sporting events, concert, and theater tickets whenever those things come back. All right, so we won't talk about Brady, but we will talk about other free agents that have moved and changed teams of note. And the first two I'll talk about both went to the same team, from the same team that they were previously on, was the Rams. Todd Gurley and Dante Fowler are both members of the Atlanta Falcons now. And if Todd Gurley can return to form, this looks like two really good moves for Atlanta, especially in what's now more crowded and more competitive NFC South.
Yeah, I think the division is actually setting up to be, if not the most competitive, then probably the second most competitive in the entire league. Atlanta looks a lot better. Also, before I get too in-depth into that, I will say that I did see Todd Gurley's tweet about, damn, I got fired on my day off.
You know what that's in reference to, right?
I know I've seen it before, but...
You ever seen the movie Friday?
Oh, yeah.
So how do you get fired on your day off?
Yeah. I appreciated that, and I appreciated the fact that he took it so well. And, being 25 years old and still having a bright future, I think he knew he was going to be okay. It wasn't one of those, he's not the type of player that if he gets cut, he may never find a job again. For him, it was just
it took, 24 hours less than?
Yeah, so I think everybody knew he was going to be fine. So I appreciated that he had a little bit of a sense of humor about it. But yeah, no, this is a very strong division now when you think about how good the Saints were last year. Now, losing Teddy Bridgewater doesn't help, but if they get a full season of a healthy Drew Brees, and they should be competitive at the very least.
Should be at the 9-11 win mark for sure.
Yeah, Atlanta, as bad as they were last year, they're only a couple of years removed from a Super Bowl appearance. Mm-hmm. Adding Fowler and Gurley is a big help. And then we see, obviously, Carolina adding Teddy Bridgewater. They did lose, what's his name, Kuechly in the offseason to retire.
Retirement, yeah.
But this is a team that definitely has potential. And even without Kuechly, they've still got a strong defense. Teddy Bridgewater is probably an upgrade over Cam Newton at this point because Cam just looked all over the place in the games that he did play.
Well, and that's kind of the funny thing that you mentioned that because the Patriots are actually very much linked to trading for Cam Newton right now. So does that worry you from a standpoint of, let's just say, I know you're kind of in the mindset that Bill's going to tank, but excuse me. Do you believe they've got a fighting chance with a Cam Newton trade in the works potentially?
So, I'll 2 points on that. First, no, I think Cam Newton helps. Like, if they were going to get, say, 5 wins without Cam Newton, they'd probably go to 8 with him. I think that helps, but the way the division is shaping up right now, I think Buffalo is a little too good. And I don't think New England has the rest of the pieces around them to be able to help somebody like Cam Newton. Plus, you have to think long-term with this, and giving up draft picks to try to win now with somebody like Cam Newton, who is a complete departure when you're talking about having to redo your entire offensive strategy compared to a Tom Brady. So I appreciate that people think that he's going to go there. Actually, he's not even the favorite to come to New England.
Yeah, we know about Andy Dalton.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Vegas odds right now.
Jameis Winston.
According to what I have seen, which is batshit crazy and would never happen, but apparently he is considered the favorite to land in New England right now, Deshaun Watson.
No. I mean, I guess Bill O'Brien might go crazy and fire sale before he gets fired, but there's zero chance.
That's why I'm saying it's not going to happen. But as of right now, as of this morning, the headline that I saw on, I think it was WEEI, said Deshaun Watson is the favorite to land in New England.
That's a horrible piece, and they should be reprimanded for that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know WEEI has some fucking characters on it, but in what world? How can you possibly justify that?
I have no idea.
I mean, the only thing I can justify is that Bill O'Brien knows he's going to get fired, and he's just going to, exercise this franchise, like get rid of every single piece that's worth a damn, and set this franchise back a decade. But I can't get on. I mean, I'd love to get on board with that if that's legit, but I have a hard time believing that that's the case.
Yeah, it would be nuts, but it's craziness, and I agree with you. I don't think it would happen, but according to what I saw this morning, he is the favorite to come to New England. And I'm looking. This is in Portuguese, so let me try to find one in English.
Don't you have the Google Translate?
I should.
The question I have with the Gurley signing is, you the Falcons have to believe that he's healthy, or a lot more healthy, or a lot more potentially productive than what the hell's his name that they just cut? He's from Florida State. I can't think of his name right now. Oh, Devontae Freeman. So you cut Devontae Freeman, who's kind of injury plagued, had a bad season last year. for a guy in Todd Gurley who was also injury plagued with the knee and had a bad season last year. So I'm hoping that the Falcons' reasoning is that they're just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle on a team-friendly deal because Devontae Freeman was definitely being paid a lot more than Gurley. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, if Freeman was being paid more, then obviously getting that salary cap relief is going to help. But they just have to figure that Gurley was either mismanaged or by what's his name, Sean McVay?
Correct.
Or that it was, he just kind of fell out of favor with that team, and they're willing to, kind of rehab him, give him a second chance, much like we've seen other running backs do when they go to a new team. They fall out of favor for whatever reason, and then the new team that they pick up with, suddenly able to either rehab their image or get their game going or use them in a different way.
The scheme's better fit for them.
So, there's a bunch of potential there.
The question I have is, and we'll talk about the next guy, Melvin Gordon is now a Denver Bronco.
Yes.
Atlanta could have gone, for what he signed with in Denver, 2 years, $16 million, $8 million a year basically, with an out after the first year. That's something Atlanta could have gone after, especially a lot more healthy. Sat out, 3, 4, 5 games this year. So he definitely could have gotten a better opportunity to have a more healthy, productive running back at that point.
Yeah, but they must have liked what they saw in Gurley when he was healthy better. And, if they're going to try to high-risk, high-reward type player, then I can't blame them for doing that.
That's fair. So let's talk about Melvin Gordon. He's obviously staying in the AFC West. So now they have basically a 3-headed tandem of Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, and Royce Freeman. Not too shabby.
Yeah, that sounds pretty decent to me. Obviously the AFC West is...
It's still Chiefs,
Yeah, it's still dominated by the Chiefs, but at least, being able to make some noise and trying to get that wild card spot isn't the worst thing in the world, especially not this year, but next year, getting that extra wild card spot. And then, I don't think the Raiders are better or worse with Mariota. I think they're probably the same as they were under Derek Carr. I think that's going to be just kind of they'll be bringing up the rear there, but I think Denver's got a chance, and the Chargers have they signed a quarterback yet? Or no, they're going
with Tyrod.
Tyrod, yeah, T-Mobile. So, that'll be interesting at the very least.
Yeah, I don't know if it's curiously a question. It feels like kind of a thunder and lightning kind of situation. I think Royce Freeman's going to be the odd man out, but I always felt Phillip Lindsay was pretty strong of a running back to go and get Melvin Gordon. That hand injury that Phillip Lindsay suffered may linger on. I'm curious to see about that because he's on a rookie deal as well. I think Phillip Lindsay was either undrafted or drafted really late in the draft a couple of years ago. So I don't know if we're looking at just maybe signing Gordon for the remainder of his prime years and making a run at it, or it's a curious. ESPN gives actually the Gordon signing a D, so I'm curious to see. Basically, I'm not reading all of their reasonings why their analysis of the signings, but they are giving the Melvin Gordon signing with the Broncos a D. So that's an interesting one to me. This is where Token Tony should have been here. His boy Eric Ebron, who he has a love-hate relationship with, is going to hopefully be catching touchdown passes from Ben Roethlisberger. He just signed with Pittsburgh on a 2-year, $12 million deal. Talk about a guy who was terrible in Detroit, which that you could talk about many guys than that. But a guy who resurged his career in Indianapolis for the last 2 years, moving to a guy who may have a better opportunity to get him the ball. You remember all the years of Heath Miller as a steady, sturdy tight end. Eric Ebron could really fill that role.
He could, and it'll be interesting if, I think the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh is actually the most interesting thing because Roethlisberger, with his injuries the last couple of years, I think that's been a little, iffy for him. The fact that his backups played as well as they did this past year, however many, they're like 7 or 8 backups, however many they went through. So I think for Ebron, the challenge is going to be getting that chemistry with whoever is starting. And if it's Roethlisberger for the first couple of games and he falters and they go with somebody else, being able to, reconnect with somebody new in a new scheme, a new coaching system, and everything else. So I think that, for me, is a concern for Ebron. So, like, if we were talking strictly fantasy, I would maybe avoid him this year because of that. But I think you're right. When he went to Indianapolis, all of a sudden he became not quite top tier. He's not like an Ertz or a Kittle or.
But 2 years ago, he caught like 15 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's.
He could be the security blanket for any one of those quarterbacks that whoever is the starter, whichever week it could be. I think Big Ben, as long as he stays healthy, he's got a huge target in Ebron.
It is nice.
Hey, and I think it's gonna be interesting because at this stage, we're not high on Cincinnati, obviously. They have the number 1 pick, so they were the worst team last year. And we don't know what to make of Cleveland after all that hype surrounding last season. So Pittsburgh, as it stands right now, with a healthy Big Ben, may be the only competition to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in that AFC North. So Eric Ebron's obviously a big help.
Yeah, and obviously Cleveland's a dumpster fire still.
Right. And they always will be. That's their mantra. It should be their logo.
Cincinnati with Joe Burrow, it'll be interesting to see if what'd they go last year? Like
2-14 or something like that?
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see if they get 6 wins with Burrow. Is that realistic? And is that considered a good season after going 2-14?
Let's just say they lose to the division. So there's 6 losses. 6 wins would be huge. Realistic, I don't know. You look at, I think the Cardinals were 1-15 before Kyler, and they finished 4-11-1 this year, I believe.
Yeah,
so I think 4 to 5 wins would be successful.
Okay.
6 to 8 wins would be huge, and they'll be crowning Joe Burrow in the streets.
Oh, sure.
He might even get a statue for that based on Cincinnati's history. All right, I think, personally, what I think might have been the best move of the last few days was this one, especially when you talked about a loaded NFC South and a guy on the other side who may be the best receiver in the game in Michael Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders is now his counterpart in New Orleans.
Yes.
2-year deal, $16 million up to $19 million in bonus clauses. I think this is huge for Drew Brees. This is huge for fantasy owners of Michael Thomas as long as Emmanuel Sanders stay healthy because, obviously you don't expect to see another record-breaking season, but how much of Michael Thomas's targets and catches and goal line looks could Emmanuel Sanders cut into?
Certainly a chunk of them, but at the very least it offers yet another weapon for an already loaded offense that looked pretty unstoppable last year until they got stopped. It's just the fact that the Saints didn't stand still and they added weapons, I think, is a testament to them because that's not something they've done in the past. We've seen seasons where they've had really good seasons, guys have walked away and they didn't replace them with talent, and then the next year or the year after, the Saints go 7-9. Mm-hmm. And it's another wasted year of Drew Brees. I think this year, the fact that they are adding more weapons to an already loaded offense speaks wonders to the, we're not going to screw around. Brees needs to win another title, so let's get him the help that he needs and let him win in New Orleans as opposed to pulling a Brady and walking off to another team.
Yeah, most definitely. You got to look at that, especially with Sanders coming off that Achilles injury. He had a pretty good year last year in Denver and San Francisco. My thought process is this is the guy that's going to be able to take the top off the defense and let Michael Thomas actually still continue to get his targets, but maybe more closer to the line of scrimmage, and let Michael Thomas use his pure talent. I'm talking about the 5-yard ins, the slants,
sure, the
screen plays, whereas back last year when you needed a big play, it was like, well, let's triple Thomas and make someone else beat us, at that point. So I think Emmanuel Sanders, if he stays healthy, has the ability to expand this offense. In my opinion, the key catalyst to this, especially if they want to remain competitive, successful, and a Super Bowl contender is Alvin Kamara's got to get back to 2 years ago form. The reason that they were able to let Mark Ingram go is because of Alvin Kamara's versatility and consistency, and we didn't see that last year.
We didn't, but I mean, obviously, it didn't hurt them going 13-3.
Well, yeah, but they had Latavius Murray as a steady plow horse of Mark Ingram. They don't have him this year, and it doesn't look like they've really filled that need or that void. I mean,
not yet.
Alvin Kamara was injured in and out of the lineup last year, but Latavius Murray was able to carry the load. If Alvin Kamara is either injured or ineffective, then that is the hole in the offense, in my opinion.
Okay. That's probably fair. I'm not willing to completely write them off. I'm waiting to see what they do with the rest of free agency and in the draft to see if they can get somebody that can fill that
right. And
void.
You talk about them being 13-3 last year. We just mentioned all three teams. The Bucs were average. They lost a lot of close games. The Atlanta was a dumpster fire, but did beat them once.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that because you had Atlanta beating them in
like
our
a six or 700 money line.
Yeah, in our contest,
and then almost beat them the other time when they converted 3 successful onside kicks. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I think that was the Thanksgiving night game. And then you have Carolina, who we imagine will be better than their 9 straight losses to end the season last year.
Yeah, which I hope they're better. I do like that Carolina franchise. I've always wanted them to do well.
Well, in fairness, I was on Kyle Allen last year. I was a big fan of Kyle Allen. Teddy Bridgewater is an upgrade over Kyle Allen.
Oh, for sure.
So I would imagine, even losing Luke Kuechly, I would imagine that they are going to be at least a little bit more competitive this year than they were the tail end of last year. So. All right, so there's still some big names on the board. I'm going to ask you where you would like to see these guys end up.
Okay.
Because, I mean, as the dominoes fall, the market's getting real weird for some of these guys. Now, the quarterback, obviously, that I have on here, that market's still wide open if he's willing to also not take a starter job. And there's a place I'd like to see him, and we'll talk about it in a second. But the first guy on this list, a lot of people, his potential is huge. When he's not hurt, you see him and you see the havoc he wreaks. And the question is I believe the reason he's not signed is because of the injury history, and that's Jadeveon Clowney. There's a lot of reports saying he'll probably end up back in Seattle on a reduced deal, something a little less than he expected from the market. But the market right now is just not there, and many people believe it is it's the injury history.
I could definitely see that. They don't want to take a risk on a guy that's going to demand big money if they're not going to get the production out of him. I think taking reduced money going to Seattle makes sense. I'm trying to think the team that he would look scariest on would be lining up next to a Bosa in San Francisco.
Yeah, that would be an interesting thought process right there for sure. Yeah, a team where he's not the only, defensive lineman relied on to create havoc, because I don't really have a lot of remembrance of the rest of Seattle's defense really being effective. But Jadeveon Clowney, I think, has got to go back to the Seahawks. I just don't think there's a market for him with the payday he expects, and my guess is that he won't go back to the Seahawks, and he'll take a deal. I feel like he'll take a deal with like the Eagles or something.
Eagles?
I just feel like that's where he's going to end up. Plus, that big dude would look badass in that eagle green. I've always liked that eagle green. with a dark visor, he would look like a beast. Well, not that he already doesn't.
If a team is going to be willing to pay him the kind of money that he wants, it's going to have to be a team that has a quarterback on a rookie deal that's team friendly. So if you look at a team like Arizona or the Jets or
maybe the Bengals. Maybe the Bengals go after Jadeveon Clowney if they
Burrow.
draft Joe Burrow, because they're not going to get Chase Young.
Right. So, those are the types of teams where I think is most realistic for him if he holds out for the big money. I hope that he has the support circle around him that says, don't take the big money, take a short money 1-year deal, prove you can stay healthy.
Reset your market.
Make this your prove-it year. and then next year go out there and get the big deal. And I think that would be in his best interest long term. I don't know that he thinks like that. So I'm curious to see how he...
Well, if that were the case, then check this out, this potential scenario. If that were the case, to reset his market, what if you paired him alongside Jason Pierre-Paul in Tampa?
Oh.
He'd be going to a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
We all have our different opinions on that, but he'd be going to a team that's a Super Bowl contender, and especially if he has a good year and that team wins the Super Bowl, he'd definitely be resetting his market at that point.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of free agents and people looking for teams have been inquiring about going to Tampa Bay now that Brady's there. So it is a little curious.
It's an attractive destination,
Yeah.
especially with Brady, and the number one reason I think all good players should go to Florida, Texas.
No income tax.
No state income tax.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he can take a lesser deal, and depending on where he would have signed, he can actually make equal to or more money in that spot, too. So resetting his market in Tampa might be a good move for him. If not, I think he goes back to Seattle on a 1 or 2 year contract that's a little more team-friendly as well.
I can see that.
Wide receiver is a position where we have tons of them, but it looks like Robbie Anderson, with all his legal troubles and the Jets sucking, is not going to be retained by them. He's been a pretty good, promising young receiver. I think a guy who could be a number 3 in spots in certain destinations. He had over the last 6 games last year, he had 27 catches, 420 yards, and 5 touchdowns, again, with a very paltry New York Jets team. Where's a spot you could see a Robbie Anderson finding a home in next year?
I guess it depends on what he's looking for. If he wants a chance to... How old is Robbie Anderson?
27.
27, so he's still got a few good years left in him, theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
If he's looking for a chance to build long-term, obviously playing in a team like New England or Buffalo or even Miami, being able to play against the Jets and, go out there and kind of stick it to them in the division with... especially with Buffalo being able to have Josh Allen. New England obviously is attractive with Belichick, and some people seem to like Josh McDaniels. But
I like Josh McDaniels.
I think, realistically, one of the spots that I think makes sense, especially after losing Hopkins, is now Houston.
Okay, that would give them a formidable trio, and Stills, Fuller, especially the fact that Fuller can't stay healthy for a full season. Robbie Anderson could slide right in there as well.
Exactly. So I think there makes a lot of sense for him. Being able to, if he comes in as the number 3, being able to move up to a number 2 based on injury, and then if he can prove it, probably can't take over for Fuller, but would still be able to make some noise.
Yeah, actually, Houston was one of the spots I was going to name as well. I think that's a good spot, especially a cheaper option that obviously he's not as talented as DeAndre Hopkins, but could definitely, as Deshaun Watson emerges and becomes a better quarterback, unless he ends up in New England, like you say.
But I did just look at that headline. It was New England starter for 2021. So not this season, but next season.
Well, I think,
and they have Deshaun Watson at plus 300 leading the pack.
That's an interesting spot because Deshaun will be due for his either 5th-year team option, or he's in Dak Prescott year right now. So that would be an interesting conundrum for 2021. That's fair. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
A spot I actually think he would be interesting in is Arizona, as you have DeAndre, you have Larry, and then if you put Robbie Anderson in there, I definitely think Kyler Murray would have a ton of weapons through the air to be able to continue to develop. And then Kenyon Drake, he was pretty decent last year in Arizona. I do like the Buffalo thought, too, with John Brown and Stephon Diggs. This guy's another pretty good option for Mr. Inaccuracy himself, Josh Allen. So it'll be interesting to see because he's a quality receiver. He's not a number 1, and if you sign him to number 1 money, I think you're going to regret it.
Yes.
The only thing I think also that kind of hurts him is there's a lot of wide receivers in this upcoming draft as well. So he may not be signed until everybody makes their picks, whenever that may be. All right. Everson Griffin, the defensive end for the Minnesota Vikings, has opted out of 3 years remaining on his deal. He's going to test the open market. A lot of people say that the Vikings organization didn't treat him properly, but I think there was a big rift when I think 2017 or 18 he took like 8 weeks off to focus on his mental health.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that created kind of a strain, especially the Vikings who have been playoff contenders the last 2 years. Taking that kind of time off to focus on a personal problem, regardless of your stance or belief on mental health, that's your own, belief system. But nevertheless, he's laying 3 years on the table to go test the open market. He's 32 years old. He's a pretty quality edge rusher. He's got 75 sacks in 10 years in the league. He had 8 last year, and he's definitely a disruptive force when he's going. I liken him to a Jadeveon Clowney, and I think his market's probably a little cheaper, especially at age 32.
Yeah, the age is not going to help him, obviously. I think some teams are going to be wary of the mental health issues, so that's going to be kind of curious just to kind of watch to see how these teams react to that sort of thing. Because, we've seen others, like Robin Leonard, who we just signed with the Vegas Golden Knights before the shutdown.
Sure. Had
that same, he has been pretty open and public about his mental health issues, but, he's battled through it, won a Jennings in the previous season. So, that's the kind of thing where some teams may be willing to overlook it, some teams may be kind of hesitant about it, so you need to find the right mix of a team that would actually look for that. I think with the age, with the health issues, he's going to have to take less money. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. I don't know what his salary situation was like in Minnesota, but what do you think about him going to a team like Kansas City? Because, obviously teams are going to be gunning for them, and, their knock this year, even though they played better than I think people gave them credit for, was their defense.
Right. Yeah, I could see a spot like that. The situation I see is, it's interesting to think that he's walking away from 3 years with the Vikings, who probably would have paid him for at least 2 of them. I'm thinking he's looking at a 3 to 4 year max deal where he probably it could be more team friendly where he's out after 2 years. So there had to be something in Minnesota that just rubbed him the wrong way, because I think at his age, to have 3 more years, on his contract as a sense of security, to walk away from that just doesn't seem right. We talk about the Minnesota Vikings. They could be a Super Bowl contender. They've been talked like that over the last 3 years since Kirk Cousins has been there.
Yep.
Kansas City makes a lot of sense. I think. I really don't know. Is he playing for money at this point? Because walking away from a title contender, I don't know what his mindset is going to be. Is his mindset to lock up as much money as he can for the rest of his career? It sure seems that way.
And that, I think at 32 years old, that's probably it. He can probably see the sunset over the horizon, so to speak. So he could just be going out there trying to get as much money as humanly possible to lock it away for his family.
Yeah, he's a guy who I wouldn't mind seeing. I know John Gruden loves veterans. He's a guy I wouldn't mind seeing in Las Vegas.
That would be interesting.
So, all right, another defensive lineman who was with Tampa last year, and there's a lot of things that say that he may end up there this year again, re-signing, is Ndamukong Suh. He is 33 years old. He is not one of the more dominant defensive players as he once was, but if he signs with a new team, that'll be his 4th team in 4 seasons.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Sue. I think, part of me thinks that he's kind of gotten away from his dirtiest player in the league vibe that he won, 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row?
Something like that. Which actually makes him less media exposed, too.
True.
Because that's the thing. I think a lot of people got tired of him because he's like, dude, you're so good, but yet you have to be so dirty. And then now when he stopped being dirty, he's in the later stages of his career, and he's kind of an average player now. So his media exposure is almost nil.
Yeah, which is probably good for him. I mean, somebody probably told him clean up your act and stay out of the limelight, which I think he's doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, last year or 2 years ago with LA, there were some rumblings of locker room issues. Last year, you didn't really hear anything in Tampa. I personally think he should find a way to stay in Tampa. This is the time of your career to go get a ring. And again, whether you agree with it or not, the Buccaneers are going to be considered Super Bowl contenders simply on the Tom Brady signing.
Sure.
So, unless he is going to a Kansas City or a Baltimore, which Baltimore would be another interesting spot for him too.
Yeah.
I think you stay in Tampa in this spot.
I think for him, it would make sense to stay in Tampa. I think there are a couple other interesting spots where he could go. One of them that I'm thinking of might be Green Bay.
Okay.
I don't know what their salary situation is like, but I know that they were pretty poor when it came to run defense, especially last year. So if you can get a guy like Sue, who, just that other presence on the line that gives you another chance to knock somebody down before they can really get going in the running game, I think that definitely helps you. Obviously Baltimore would make some sense. We haven't talked much about Washington, and Washington, they're sort of in a rebuilding, with, what's his name, Haskins as quarterback. You don't know if they're trying to tank, so obviously they're probably not going to contend this year for a Super Bowl, but that would be another spot where if they're desperate for help, they were poor in every aspect of the game, but especially defense.
That's true.
I think Sue could go there and be a superstar.
Well, he could, and the problem with maybe signing in Washington is the expectations will be higher because, I mean, look how many guys have signed there past their prime. I mean, you have Deion Sanders, D'Angelo Hall, Albert Hainsworth. I mean, the list goes on and on of guys who were past their prime that Dan Snyder has brought in. So if Ndamukong Suh comes in at age 33, his best year is obviously behind him. He could be just adding to the list in that spot. And what does he stand to gain from that? They're not, like you said, they're not contending for a Super Bowl. Now, if he wants to still play and they're the only team on the market that's offering him anything, obviously you go with it.
Of course.
But I believe in Sue's career in this spot, he's probably on the cusp of the Hall of Fame. Getting a ring may put him in there.
Well, that's a fair point. And if that is on his mind, then by all means, don't go to Washington. But I think Tampa Bay would be a good spot for him in that area, being able to play with.
I don't even mind that Green Bay spot. That's a pretty good, interesting spot too.
Yeah, I think that would be definitely a good spot for him to play with yet another Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. It's interesting trying to figure out the mindset of some of these guys, because for the guys who have a ring, we know that when they sign in free agency, it's typically just about the money.
Right.
For the guys like Sue that have never won, you wonder if it is get me the ring or get
And he
me
got paid by Detroit too,
Yeah.
so it's not like he's hurting for money. I don't know his financial situation, but he's definitely gotten paid. I think he made $15 million in LA last year. Now, obviously, after all the tax and everything, it's about half. But point being is he's gotten money. Now, whether he's blown it, that's his personal life. But if it's all about money, like you said, go with the best offer that sits on the table and don't worry about your career. But if you're trying to win or get into the Hall of Fame, staying put or going to another contender, Kansas City would be an interesting one too. I like that you said.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's just a matter of trying to figure out his mindset. So, I'm, free agency for me is always so interesting, because trying to figure out where these guys are going and trying to figure out, how they look at life, how they look at this league, and if it's about getting the money, if it's about winning, if it's about playing with certain players, then, there's a bunch of different aspects that go into it.
I think when most, I take Le'Veon Bell excluded out of this, but hold on, I gotta sneeze.
Wow.
I'll leave that in the recording.
Good.
I think
blow out the eardrum of our listeners.
I think most players who go into it probably have if they have good representation, have all of those factors. And as you start talking to your guys and you start looking, kind of the self-reflection, some of those go higher, legacy, money. You talk to their families. Do they want to move? Somebody who's lived in, let's just take Everson Griffin. His family's lived in Minnesota for 10 years. Do they even want to move? I mean, their kids are in school. A lot of people don't think about the family aspect. Sometimes that, the families, the income, the state income taxes, how much you're going to pay, can you compete? There's probably a list of 10 to 15 things. And as you talk to different people in your inner circle, those graphs shoot up and down in terms of importance. And also you have to look at who actually wants you. There's not a lot of guys who have the entire league pining, for their services. And that included Tom Brady, from what I understand. I mean, there's word out that the Chargers never actually made an offer, despite everyone linking Brady to the Chargers. They said that the only two people that were making the offer were actually the Bucks, and then everybody just assumed he was going back to New England.
Yeah, and rumors now are circulating that New England didn't even make an offer. That
I think that a lot of people got that from Kraft's speech, because I think if you believe what Kraft said, Tom Brady said, it's time for me to move on.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, are you really even going to make him an offer? I mean, I think if knowing Robert Kraft and his affinity for Tom Brady, he would have said, Tom, here's the check. You write it. If you really want to be here, you write the check.
Yeah. And, it came out the other day, I think after we talked, that Brady was so upset about being linked in the trade in 2017 to go to San Francisco that he was done with New England. And as soon as the contract was up, he was out. And he may have said that as early as 2 years ago and said, because of this betrayal, I'm out of here. And then, so New England probably didn't even bother writing him an offer. Which,
totally plausible.
If that's the case, then then the market for Tom Brady was probably Tampa Bay with big money, and then maybe teams like Oakland and Las Vegas, a couple of these other teams that maybe threw him short money. Probably.
Well, he was linked to Tennessee for a while, but I mean, as soon as they re-signed Tannehill, that meant one of two things. That Tom was like, no thanks, or they just realized, and because a lot of people probably, after they sat down and took a look at it, a lot of these GMs and these teams said, why are we pining for the services of a 43-year-old quarterback and paying him $30 million based on what he did for another team?
Yeah, and let's face it, his stats definitively declined this past year.
Sure.
So.
And I think a team like Tampa, teams like that, not teams who are competitive. I think the Chargers could be super competitive this year if they stay healthy. I like Tyrod Taylor. I don't mind him. But there's a lot of teams. These 2 years that Brady is going to be in Tampa, they're going to get the ROI tenfold on him being there, even if they're never competitive.
Absolutely, they will.
So, all right, the last guy on my list, speaking of Tampa, he is a 26-year-old former quarterback and the first quarterback to throw 30 touchdowns and 30 picks in a season in 31 years.
Whoops.
This home studio is comfortable, but we don't have a lot of wiggle room. The minute I move, I can hear it in the headphones.
Yeah, this is.
But this is way better than the other studio.
This is a little tight here. Yeah.
Maybe you need to lose some more weight.
Yeah, maybe. I think I've actually gained a little bit back. So.
Have you?
Ugh. Yeah.
So Jameis Winston, obviously, is the person we're talking about.
Famous Jameis.
Now it's Jameis Winston with clear vision too. He got LASIK surgery.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, good for him.
Did you see? There was a tweet. It was a joke tweet on social media. It was from Tom Brady, and it said, "Hey Tampa, just made the move down. Is there any fun nights, any fun spots to hit, or any fun things to do in the city?" And then the reply was Jameis Winston. He goes, "Hey, I live here too. What are you doing down here?"
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, honestly, I'll just say this first and foremost. I'd love to see him in New England and really have a true, is this Bill Belichick can just take the scraps that Tampa Bay didn't want by signing Brady and win.
I've heard that. I don't mind it if...
And especially if he's successful now. There's no denying his talent.
Sure.
It's just his ability to throw the ball away instead of the other team, he needs to fix. And if you trust your coaches, I mean, that's the organization to do it.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind that. I think, again, you're going to run into the same problem with that you would have with Cam Newton, where, the offensive scheme in New England is not built for a quarterback like that. You need a more traditional pocket passer.
Maybe no, but isn't sorry to interrupt you, but isn't the new wave of coaching especially look at Andy Reid, to adapt to your talent?
You would think.
I think the New England Patriots especially have made a living on adapting to what the league has thrown at them.
Yes, but the one spot that they haven't had to change is quarterback.
That is correct. Well, this would be an interesting test.
They haven't had to redo that. Sure, and if there is a place that he could go and thrive, and
I got another spot on my list too, but I like the Patriots and Jameis Winston together.
I don't know. I can see it. It kind of makes sense, but I think there are a couple of other spots to me that might make more sense, and both of them are still in the state of Florida.
I will disagree with you in Miami, but Jacksonville, I can understand.
Jacksonville, I think, makes a lot of sense.
I think we got to have Gardner Minshew, though. We got to have Mustache Minshew for a whole season.
I think is an interesting case, but I think the fact that I don't see Winston taking a deal where he's not going to be the starter, and I think if he has to compete for the job, he may shy away from it. Who in Miami beats Winston right now? You think Rosen's going to win that job?
No, but I think potentially someone in the draft, and if they draft Tua, I would say they go with Tua and Ryan Fitzpatrick for another year.
Okay, well,
he may be on the market for a while, and if he's only expecting to be a starting quarterback, he may be on the market into the season.
For a long time, yes.
I'll give you a team here that I think would make the most sense, and he has the potential to be a starter and to be the future of that franchise.
Okay.
Pittsburgh.
Interesting.
Because
very interesting.
He could play the backup role to begin the season, and like you said, Big Ben's one wrong turn away from being retired or on the injured list again. And Jameis Winston, they have a tough offensive line, pretty decent receivers. James Conner, is it James Conner? Yeah, James Conner, pretty good running back, great defense. That's a team, and with a coach in Mike Tomlin, who's a very, very big players coach kind of guy, but also definitely is a company man. I think Jameis Winston would be Pittsburgh would be an interesting spot for Jameis Winston. He could be the future, especially, Big Ben has what? Healthy, maybe 2 years?
Maybe.
He's not in shape, that's for sure. He doesn't have the same regimen as a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers.
Did you see the video that he put out yesterday?
He looked like he hibernated for like 8 months.
Yeah, that's not a good look for him. Especially looking like Joe Thornton's hairier brother.
That's a good comparison.
It's. I think it's interesting because I don't know what the market is going to look like for a Jameis Winston. I know that the Chargers have said that they're comfortable with Tyrod Taylor. Would adding Winston help that team, or is that kind of?
I don't think in Anthony. Oh God, what the hell is the hell's the coach? Anthony Lynn's last year. Effectively, if they're not successful, I think he can't have quarterback controversy. If he's going with Tyrod, he's got to go. He's got to sink with Tyrod.
He's got to sink or swim. Okay.
Yeah.
Then the only other spots that he would go are
the starting market's not huge for him.
No, it definitely isn't. So if he's looking at backup jobs, there's plenty of opportunity for him.
And that's why I think the Pittsburgh's a great spot. You have an injury-prone quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. There's a strong chance that Jameis Winston, if he was in Pittsburgh, would play at least a quarter of the season.
What about the Jets?
I don't think they're ready to give up on Darnold yet.
You think if he goes, the last 2 seasons haven't been great. If he starts the season, say...
He hasn't really been that poor. The team is not good, but he hasn't really been terrible.
No, but
I don't think that organization's ready to try to tame Jameis Winston either. That's the question. You got to have a team that's going to be able to mold Jameis Winston, because you can't just throw him into a system and say, do what you do, because what he do is 30 picks. I think he needs a year to sit and watch a Hall of Fame quarterback. Or if he's going to start, he needs a Hall of Fame organization like New England. The market for him to start is almost non-existent.
I
mean, you could
agree.
say Denver, but they like Drew Lock. You could say what? Who else would you say? I mean,
And I've been racking my brain.
say
trying to
Detroit,
think
but they're
of
sticking with
one.
Stafford.
Yeah.
Chicago may be an interesting spot because
But they just signed Foles.
yeah, they got Foles and Trubisky. I mean, they've got too much. There's no spots, dude.
Yeah.
There's no spots to start. That's for sure, and except for New England, ironically of all places.
And man, do you think Cleveland would ever try to make a move?
Next year, if Baker sucks again.
Okay.
Who the hell's the coach there now?
I have no fucking.
Oh, Stefanski. Stefanski's the coach. I don't know. I mean, he liked a Kirk Cousins type. The Kirk Cousins is kind of one of the reasons he got a job.
Yeah.
So I don't think Jameis Winston really fits in that mold. I mean, Cincinnati, they're a dumpster fire organization. To take on I don't know what the right word is, to take on a gunslinging quarterback that probably isn't ready to take over a team. I mean, I don't know. Jacksonville would be an interesting spot. He would have a chance to start, but he's not getting $20 million a year if he thinks he is.
No, definitely not.
He's getting Teddy Bridgewater, New Orleans Saints money, like 8 to 10, to probably back up. And if he has to start and he's successful, the word of the day is reset your market.
Yeah.
He may have to take a 2-year deal.
And that's if he's successful. If he gets on the field, if he takes a backup role and whoever he's hoping to usurp doesn't leave or doesn't get hurt, then he might just be stuck.
Well, that brings another question. With Mason Rudolph and his name was Duck. I don't remember. Devlin Hodges. If Jameis went to Pittsburgh, would he be the number 2 behind Roethlisberger?
Oh, maybe not.
I mean, I don't think fans and the staff is really happy with what they saw out of Mason Rudolph. They may be looking for a trade in that spot, but I don't know. Maybe, and this will never happen. I know this will never happen, but maybe Jameis Winston takes a backup role in Tampa.
Oh.
It'll never happen, but if you swallowed the biggest piece of humble pie and said, I want 1 year, maybe 2, to watch this guy, and then when I'm a free agent or when Tom Brady retires, if he retires in 2 years, I'm 28 years old. It'll never happen, but I'm just saying, just think about that for a second. You have to be swallowing the biggest piece of humble pie.
Which, if he was going to back up a Hall of Famer and then try to sit out for a couple of years before coming in, he'd have a better shot in Green Bay.
You think Aaron Rodgers retires before Brady does?
No, but I'm saying if he is just looking to back up a Hall of Famer and get that, kind of absorb the practices and the better way to play the game than what he's been doing, I think.
Well, I mean, you could argue that Aaron Rodgers doesn't take practice seriously, though.
No, that's maybe true. And
I think if anybody takes practice seriously, it's Tom Brady. I mean, the guy takes everything in his life seriously.
Yes. Well, except the preseason.
Well, they all don't take that seriously. But, I mean, interesting thought here. Jameis Winston becomes the backup, takes $8 to $9 million, be the backup in Tampa Bay, and things go poorly after a year, and look who looks coming out looking like a shiny white knight, Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine if Tampa goes 7-9 again this year with Tom Brady?
Oof.
Tampa Bay fans would turn on him.
Absolutely.
This ain't what we signed up for. And I don't know the details of the contract, but if Tampa Bay was smart, they'd give themselves an out after a year, after 2 years. They may have to take a dead money hit, but Jameis Winston might. Sometimes the backup quarterback is always the most popular guy on the team. It'll never happen. Again, this is pure fantasy world. I don't think Jameis and his guys would swallow that kind of piece of humble pie. And I'm not faulting him for that. I get it. But if I were him, I'd take strong, hard looks at Jacksonville and Pittsburgh for his destinations.
Could you imagine a scenario where Brady is on the field and the crowd is chanting, Jameis, Jameis, Jameis?
Yes. In year 2, when they start off 0-4. If Jameis Winston was on that team.
If he's on the team.
Or if he's not on that team, in year 2 when they start off 0-4 after a 6-10 season, and they go, Jameis was better. I am very 50-50 on how the Brady experiment's going to go. I really am. I mean, you know, the adage is, you know, you never get too high and never get too low. But, I mean, everybody is, like, crowning the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Tom Brady. And I'm not ready to make that declaration yet. Yeah.
My dad wants him to fail. And fail, like, miserably.
That's unfortunate. I don't want him to fail miserably. I just feel like that's a strong chance that he might. And I think failing is 7. And I think 8-8 and 9. I think missing the playoffs is failing. And I'd venture to say losing in the first round would be considered a failure. Not to the organization, because they haven't made the playoffs in 12 years and haven't won a playoff game in almost 20.
Yes.
But I think for him, not making the divisional round would be considered a failure in the first season.
I can see that.
I mean, this is Mr. AFC Championship we're talking about here.
Yeah, he's not used to not getting in the playoffs.
Exactly. So, Jameis, if you're listening, I got a big-ass piece of humble pie for you. All right, last thing we talk about here before we wrap it up, and, you know, we'll have to get into the social issue here, but obviously we're all dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 virus, and the NFL is not excluded from that. We have a very high-profile name who has now tested positive, and that is Sean Payton, New Orleans Saints head coach, and we forget sometimes that even though the league year has gone on, these guys have to deal with the same pandemic we're dealing with, and obviously they're not dealing with the same challenges faced, obviously financially, but the COVID-19 virus is now in the NFL.
Yep. And I think because it was the offseason, it probably, I don't want to say worked out well for the NFL, but the fact that we weren't having teams, practicing or getting together for team activities or this.
The only thing we had was the front office making trips to court free agents.
Sure, but I mean those are smaller groups as
Correct.
Opposed to,
Absolutely.
If Sean Payton is in there and he's like slapping everybody high five after a good defensive play or a good offensive,
he's just handed it all to him.
Yeah, then he, potentially the outbreak monkey and spreading it across the entire team. So it is certainly interesting, but I think that having somebody that high profile within the league getting the disease is actually kind of beneficial, because now you can say, okay, this is serious enough, and now it is affecting one of our own, so now the league can take more proactive action. Mm-hmm. And it could help to turn hearts and minds for the people in New Orleans that were saying, oh, this isn't serious, don't worry about this, and now
one of their coach, yeah.
So it's something that they can actually look at and hang their hat on and say, oh, this is something that we need to actually pay attention to.
I mean, yeah, depending on who you believe, this virus could last 2 months, 5 months, 8 months, 10 months. I mean, we are looking at a situation where obviously now, because of the resources available, there's going to be a lot of people in direct contact with Sean Payton who are getting tested.
Yep.
If those numbers come out positive, it creates more and more and more and more of a wider reach. Obviously, the only high-profile event that will have a ton of people has already been at least postponed. I've already heard the Las Vegas portion is canceled. That is the draft.
Yes.
I mean, luckily for the NFL, until training camp, which I believe starts in late June or early July, they don't have anything on the schedule that requires they take a huge financial hit like not having the draft.
Yeah, well, it could come down to that teams just, essentially WebEx or video conference in to do the draft. And
it's definitely going to be a YouTube. I've heard it's going to be broadcast on YouTube and regular television. And I mean, war rooms, as they call them, most of the time, they're not even in the draft city. It's usually a representative from the team who, basically hands them the card. Now I'm thinking Goodell might just get some text messages. Hey, we're taking Joe Burrow.
That would be interesting.
Okay, thanks.
You think Goodell would hold up his smartphone to the screen and say, Cincinnati picks Joe Burrow, and
See, here it is. There's a
then
text.
accidentally leaves the sender's phone number up on the screen so that everybody can start calling in?
Yeah, I'll call him and suggest a trade. Hey, I got two 50-inch TVs. I'll trade you for Pac-Man Jones. I don't even know if he's still on the team. But I don't know a lot of Bengals. Trust me. I don't know a lot of Bengals.
Is he still in the league even?
I don't think so.
Let's find out.
I can't remember the last place he even played. I want to say, like, Oakland?
It's possible. Wikipedia has him listed as a former American football player.
That's about right, yeah. So, I think the NFL, there's a lot of people on social media calling for the NFL to suspend their season. I think that's ludicrous. I mean, the season doesn't start for another 6 months.
Yeah, no, that's batshit. It's going to be curious to see how long, like, Major League Baseball delays their season. It'll be curious to see how the NBA and NHL handles this, and if and when they decide to come back, how they decide to come back. I've heard all sorts of scenarios for hockey.
Yeah, I've heard that they just start the playoffs now with the teams that have qualified.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've
also heard a scenario where all 31 teams make the playoff.
Yeah.
And
the Bruins get a bye, and then the
Bruins.
team.
Well, actually, the Bruins and some other teams would get like double buys.
Ah.
So, like, the Red Wings and the teams in the dumpster would still have a chance to advance, which would be an interesting scenario. They won't, but...
No, of course not.
But that would be an interesting thought process. Could you see, like, a team like the Ottawa Senators, who are clearly out, like, make it to the conference finals?
I saw one that said... And the scenario that the players, I think, are pushing for is just, when we come back, say it's, like, end of April, beginning of May... resume the regular season, play the playoffs as it was, and delay the start of next season into like mid-November, and then delay the following season so that it ends in July, and then by 2021, the start of that season would be essentially on time.
I mean, could you imagine this virus having that much weight in I know it's only sports, but could you imagine this virus having that much weight in the sports landscape for a 2 to 3 year period?
It would be crazy, but it would be a hell of a story that people could remember in a generation from now, and we can talk about it. Even though it doesn't really get talked about now, there's still people that can point back to the 1919 Stanley Cup final between Seattle and it might have been Ottawa. Seattle and somebody else. The entire Stanley Cup final was canceled because of the Spanish flu, and they sent everybody home. So I don't think we would get a situation where the Cup final is canceled, but having it pushed back, having it delayed, having some kind of odd scenario where obviously this isn't a typical year.
I mean, whatever scenario is out is going to be unfair to someone, because I've heard just take the division leaders and play a 4-team playoff. Yeah. I've heard just take the division leaders and the runner-ups currently and take an 8-team playoff.
I've heard take the top 8 teams in terms of winning percentage and have those 8 go into the playoffs, which would put Golden Knight as the bottom seed, by the way, even though they are leading the Pacific. The Pacific is a dumpster fire, so
it's fair.
It's all these weird scenarios, but that's just hockey. For football, because they don't start for another 5 months, I think, it's probably a little premature to start saying, because in 2 months, this could either be completely cleared up or it could be even worse than what we're at now.
Right.
So not knowing and having it so far in the future, I think it's just lay back and kind of wait and see what happens. The fact that things in like April and May are getting postponed or canceled, that makes sense to me, because people have to travel, people have to put these things together, like Punk Rock Bowling, which is at the end of May every year. That has already been pushed back to the fall. That makes sense to me because bands have to, figure out where they're going, they have to tour, and people are coming in, getting hotel rooms. If you don't know that the hotels are even going to be open by then it makes sense to cancel.
Especially since people are still holding those reservations too.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be interesting. I know that there's been talk of the World Series of Poker being postponed. no cancellation talk yet, but postponement into maybe the month of August would be the actual when it happens before school gets back in. School gets back in session and things like that. Of course, it's already hot in May and June. It's just going to get hotter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but they keep that room at about 40 degrees. So.
That's true. Well, hopefully, and I know this is just merely a speculation, but hopefully, if it's like any other virus, heating up will be kind of the death of it.
Yeah, and that's been the hope. I think that's been kind of touted as a possibility, but I think...
I don't know if you noticed it, but once they finally started issuing the mandates and the initial suggestion by the governor here, it got colder.
It did.
It was almost like the virus was like, all right, time to shine, bitches.
My favorite thing so far is that this virus is actually a conspiracy theory by dogs to keep people home so we can spend more time with them.
Well, as an owner of 2 dogs, it seems legit. Have you seen apparently coronavirus is a general name for flu strains.
Yes.
And one of the new conspiracies out is that Lysol disinfectant wipes actually on the back of their bottle or cylinder or whatever you call them. You've seen those before, right?
Yes.
It says helps protect against coronavirus. So now people are thinking, oh, Lysol's in this big conspiracy to sell all their product. And because when I looked at it, I'm like, no way. We have a bottle of that stuff, or a can of that stuff from like 2 years ago, because we stockpiled some of that stuff before, like cleaning supplies and stuff. We always have a good supply of.
Yeah.
And it says help protect against coronavirus. So I had to do some research, and coronavirus is just flu strains in general. That's why they finally changed this to the COVID-19.
Yeah, or the novel coronavirus.
Or the novel, or the Chinese virus, depending on who you ask. Yes. So anyways, let's hope the NFL starts to take more action, because the NFL, whether you agree or not, the NFL has social influence.
Oh, sure.
And that the NFL can maybe take a stand here and say, guys, you need to stay home. And regardless of your feelings about what's going to happen to you if you catch the coronavirus, I'm not doing a PSA here, but I've said this from day one. I said, I don't mind if we're going to do a shutdown, and I'm obviously out of work. But if I'm going to be out of work in vain, I want it to be because everyone else participated, not this. You see these videos of people going to the beach on spring break. They're like, fuck that shit. I'll do what I want, blah, blah, blah. I feel I'm going to feel more pissed if I spend a month out of work and we have to spend, and then the curve ramps up in another month and we're stuck more. Does that make sense? I feel like the NFL may have a shot here to say, look, it's infiltrating some of your most important, weekend routines, like watching football. You want to watch football in September? Stay home now.
Yeah, and this is we know it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's just a question of how long the worst part lasts and how that bell curve of new cases kind of ramps up before it starts ramping down.
Well, it's clearly going to ramp up with testing. I mean, everybody's asking for tests. Tests are becoming more and more readily available. So, and I said this before, I think on one of the other podcasts, if you test 15 million people and they're all healthy and recovered, that's going to flatten the curve just naturally.
Sure.
So if you're experiencing symptoms, but you're, a healthy person, then don't flood the hospitals. Stay home, take your Tylenol and your Gatorade, and get through this. Social distance. So.
Yeah. But, it's one of those things where I think on, Tuesday there were 4,000 cases. By Wednesday there were...
almost double.
Yeah, it went to 7,000. By Thursday, it was over 10,000. And as of Friday, as of yesterday, it was 15,000 cases. So
yes, but the good news, I hope, is that where it all started in Washington, at least in the U.S., they have actually begun declining cases. So
that helps.
That's good news, in my opinion. So, all right, let's wrap it up here. I want to thank the sponsors again, 12 Ounce Sports Radio. Where we air every weekend. We're probably going to be doing multi-week, or what do you call it? Not bi-weekly, but
just a bunch of
multi-podcasts throughout the week. So be on the lookout for us on 12 Ounce Sports Radio and also on our website, vegassquares.com. Click the menu tab podcast, and you can catch all of our podcasts from episode 1. How are we on? 160 now? All the way down to episode 1. So.
Yeah, I think this is 161.
I think you're right. So, also Seat Giant, promo code 12-ounce sports for discounted concert, sporting event, and theater tickets whenever those all open up again. So for Spike and for Token Tony, who said he was going to show up this weekend but didn't.
He sent a text while we were recording like 10 minutes ago saying, I forgot to set an alarm.
Oh, did he? I totally missed that. Well, good job, Token. So, for Spike, for the text of Token Tony, I am Aaron. We appreciate you listening. We will catch you on the next one.